The thin blanket slipped from her hunched shoulders as she stumbled on the entry step. 87 years weighed like lead on her trembling legs, but it wasn't time that brought her down. It was disbelief. The little cat in her arms let out a soft meow, as if understanding that any sound too loud could shatter what little remained of that woman. From the other side of the solid oak door, the echo of locks turning sounded like gunshots to her chest. 3.5 decades of dedication now amounted to the icy silence of an empty street where even the dry leaves seemed to judge her presence. Before we delve into this story, leave your comment with a rating from 1 to 10 and tell us what city you're joining us from. May this moment bring reflection and emotion to your heart. The wrought iron gate clanged shut behind her with a sound she knew well. She herself had chosen that lock years ago, when she still had a say in the household decisions. Now, from the outside, everything seemed different. The rose bushes she had planted with her own hands seemed to turn away, ashamed. The jasmine vine that perfumed. Sunday mornings continued to bloom. Indifferent to the drama unfolding just a few feet away, she adjusted the little cat in her lap and began to walk. Each step was a negotiation between the will to move forward and a body that insisted on reminding her of the 15 days in the attic. 15 days that felt like 15 years. 15 days that changed everything. The plastic shopping bag swung from her wrist, too heavy for so few belongings. 2 changes of clothes, an old photo of her son as a child, and a chipped mug that was all that remained. Of an entire life. There was no room in the bag for memories, but those she carried glued to her soul like scars that ache when it's about to rain. The street was too quiet for a Tuesday afternoon. The houses in the upscale neighborhood seemed closed off, with their perfectly manicured lawns and mirrored glass windows that let no one see what was happening inside. She had always known that silence was artificial, bought at a high price. Now she needed it more than ever. Her feet, swollen and sore, began to throb against the worn soles of her sandals. She stopped at the corner, breathless, and leaned against the street lamp. The little cat, Luna, purred softly, as if trying to console her. It was funny how animals understood human pain better than humans themselves. "Where to now, Luna?" she whispered to the cat, who raised her green eyes and gazed at her with that feline wisdom that always reassured her. There was no answer, of course, but there was something in the animal's gaze that said, "You've been through worse. You'll make it." She took a deep breath and smelled the afternoon, damp earth, freshly mown grass, the perfume of expensive flowers, the same scent she used to smell from her bedroom window before everything fell apart, before the renovation, before the attic, before the locked door and the days without water. She didn't want to remember, but the memories came like waves, her daughter-in-law's voice echoing up the stairs. "It's just temporary, Mrs. Helen. A week, 2 at most." The fake laugh when the construction workers arrived. The noise of the machines that drowned out her pleas for help. And then the silence that lasted 15 days. She shook her head, trying to clear her thoughts. She needed to focus on the present, on now, on the street that stretched out before her like an unanswered question. A gentle breeze made the leaves of the old oak tree dance. It was an ancient tree, planted long before that mansion was built. She always liked to imagine how many stories that tree had witnessed, how many families had come and gone, how many tears it had seen fall, how many times it had been a silent witness to tragedies happening behind closed doors. Now, she was part of one of those stories. Luna meowed again, louder this time. It was hunger, or thirst, or fear, perhaps all 3. Helen looked around, searching for a bench, a patch of shade, any place where she could sit and think. But the street was long and deserted, designed for expensive cars, not for lost people. "It's okay, Luna, we'll find a place." Her voice came out firmer than she expected. It was a lie, of course. She had no idea where to go. She had no money, no one's phone number. She didn't know any shelters. But for some reason, speaking aloud made her feel less alone. Her footsteps echoed on the pavement like a countdown. Where to? For what? She didn't know. She only knew she had to keep walking. Standing still was thinking too much, and thinking too much was going back to that dark attic where time stopped and hope faded little by little. The sun began to turn orange on the horizon. In a few hours it would be night, and she still had no idea what to do when that happened. But there was something inside her, a tiny, almost extinguished spark that insisted on not dying. It was the same thing that made her endure the 15 days locked up, the same thing that made her raise her son alone after her husband passed away, the same thing that made her work 2 jobs to pay for his education. It was stubbornness, perhaps, or dignity, or simply the instinct for survival that asks no one for permission. She looked at Luna, who was now dozing in her arms, confident that everything would be all right, and Helen decided to believe it too, for now. What she didn't know was that, at that exact moment, many miles away, her son's cell phone was ringing insistently. Business troubles. Cancelled trip. A return flight arriving much earlier than planned. Fate, sometimes, is in a hurry to correct its own mistakes. Chapter 2. 3 months earlier. Morning light streamed through the bedroom window, as it always had, golden, generous, full of promises. Helen was folding her grandson's clothes when she heard voices in the living room, low, conspiratorial voices, the kind of conversation that stops when someone approaches. She descended the stairs slowly, holding the banister she had polished so many times. The voices became clearer. It was Monica, her daughter-in-law, talking on the phone. Something about renovation, expansion, temporary. "You problem?" Helen stopped on the last step, making no sound. "It's only for a week, 2 weeks at most. She'll stay in the attic we fixed up. Of course, it has a window, ventilation." The lies flowed naturally from Monica's lips like poisoned honey. Helen felt her stomach drop. She was talking about her. She was planning... What? She stepped back 1 step, making the wood creak. Sudden silence in the living room. "Mom? Helen? Are you there?" Monica's voice changed completely, sweet, careful, concerned. "Come here, dear. I need to talk to you." Helen descended the last step like someone walking to the gallows. Monica was as beautiful as ever, hair-styled, nails manicured, a smile that didn't reach her eyes. In the 7 years of marriage to Richard, she had transformed into the perfect trophy wife for a millionaire. She knew how to smile at the right time, support the right decisions, be beautiful in the right places. "Sit here, Mum." Monica patted the sofa next to her. "I have some wonderful news to tell you." Helen sat down, her hands cold with a premonition. Richard decided to expand the mansion. It's going to be beautiful. A home, theatre, a new suite, maybe even an indoor pool. Monica's eyes sparkled in a way Helen couldn't decipher. But of course, during the construction, it will be a little uncomfortable. Uncomfortable how? Noise, dust, workers coming and going. It's not an environment for you to rest. Monica took Helen's hand with false affection. That's why we thought of a perfect temporary solution. Helen waited. She knew what was coming next would hurt. We fixed up the back attic. It's adorable. Comfortable bed, a fan, even a small window that overlooks the garden. It will be like a spiritual retreat for you. A spiritual retreat. Helen repeated the words slowly, chewing on each syllable. Exactly. No noise, no confusion. You can rest, read, meditate. It will be wonderful. Helen looked around the living room she had helped decorate. Each piece of furniture held a memory, each object a story. The crystal vase she'd received as a wedding gift. The antique mirror she'd brought from her mother's home, the armchair where she used to rock little Richard when he had nightmares. And how long would this retreat be? A week, 2 at most, just enough time for the noisiest part of the construction. Helen nodded slowly. She had no choice, and knew it. In her own home, she was a guest. A tolerated guest, cared for out of pity, but a guest nonetheless. When would it start? Tomorrow would be ideal. The workers arrive bright and early Monday. That night, Helen packed her bags with a heavy heart. There weren't many things. A few clothes, a prayer book, Richard's childhood photo. Luna followed her around the room, sensing that something was changing. It's temporary, Luna, just temporary. But when she woke up in the attic the next morning, something inside her already knew. That wasn't true. The room was small, stuffy, with a window that overlooked the back wall. Not the garden, as Monica had promised. The bed was a thin mattress on a metal frame. The fan made an irritating noise that didn't cool anything. On the first day, she went down for lunch, as she always did. Monica was in the kitchen, directing the housekeeper. "Mum, Helen, how are you settling in upstairs?" "Fine, a little warm, but..." "That's great. Oh, by the way, it would be better if you had your meals in your room. With all this hustle and bustle from the construction, the kitchen is going to be a mess." Helen felt a shiver. "Have my meals in my room? Carla can bring up a tray for you. It will be more practical." Carla was the new housekeeper, hired a few months ago. A shy young woman who always lowered her eyes whenever Helen tried to talk to her. On the second day, the attic door was locked from the outside. Helen woke up thirsty and tried to turn the doorknob. It didn't budge. She tried again, with more force. Nothing. She pounded on the door, called for Monica, for Carla, for the workers who were supposedly doing the renovation. Silence. She pressed her ear to the wood and heard voices downstairs. Laughter. The TV blaring. Normal life happening while she was locked up like what? Like a prisoner. She pounded on the door until her fists were red. She screamed until her voice cracked. Nothing. When the sun began to set, she sat on the edge of the bed and cried for the first time in a long time. Luna climbed onto her lap and purred softly as if trying to console her. "What's happening, Luna? What did I do wrong?" On the third day, the food stopped coming. On the fourth day, the water did too, and Helen began to understand that this wasn't a renovation. It was something much worse. It was a plan. Cold, calculated, cruel. From downstairs, when the wind was right, she heard Monica on the phone. "Oh, she's fine, resting a lot. You know how it is, age. She's quieter now, prefers to stay in her room." Lies. All lies. On the fifth day, Helen stopped pounding on the door, stopped screaming, stopped waiting for someone to help, and began to fight for her own survival. Chapter 3. 10 days locked up. Helen had lost track of the hours, but she could count the days by the changes in light from the small window. Thirst was worse than hunger. Much worse. Her mouth was dry as sandpaper, her tongue stuck to the roof of her mouth, and she began to lick the condensation that formed on the window pane in the early morning hours. Luna was weaker. Much weaker. Helen shared the last drops of water she could collect with her, but knew it wouldn't last much longer. Luna spent most of her time sleeping, conserving energy, as animals do when they sense the end. "No, Luna, not yet." Helen stroked the cat's matted fur. "You'll see, someone will come. Richard will come back from his trip and get us out of here." But deep down, a part of her was starting to doubt. Where were the workers? Where was the noise of the renovation? The attic was on the second floor. She could hear everything that happened in the house. And what she heard was normal life. Television, conversations, laughter. The routine of people not worried about any construction. She began to understand that there was no renovation. Never had been. On the afternoon of the 10th day, she heard footsteps on the stairs. Her heart pounded. Someone was coming. Finally, someone was coming. She dragged herself to the door, her legs wobbly, and pressed her ear to the wood. The steps stopped on the other side. A key turned in the lock. The door opened, and Monica appeared, wearing rubber gloves and a surgical mask, as if entering a contaminated zone. She held a bottle of water and a piece of mouldy bread. Helen tried to stand, but her legs gave out. She fell to the floor, looking at her daughter-in-law with a mixture of relief and terror. "Please." Her voice came out as a moan. "Water." Monica threw the bottle on the floor, where it rolled to Helen's feet. She didn't say a word. She didn't look into her eyes. She threw the bread too, turned her back, and left, locking the door again. Helen dragged herself to the bottle like a wounded animal. She opened it with trembling hands and drank half at once. She saved the other half, forcing herself to drink slowly. She broke the bread into tiny pieces, gave a part to Luna, and ate the rest slowly, chewing each crumb as if it were her last. The bread was spoiled, but she ate it anyway. That night, while Luna slept curled up on her chest, Helen looked at the ceiling and allowed herself to think about what Monica was planning. It wasn't just cruelty, it was elimination. She was trying to get rid of her. Why? What threat did she represent? And then she remembered Richard's will. She knew her son had left a sum for her in his will, and also ensured she could live in the house until her death. It was a protection he had insisted on putting in place years ago when he was still single. "Mom, if I ever marry and my wife doesn't like you, I want you to have a place to live. This house is yours too." At the time, Helen had laughed. "What nonsense, son. Any woman who loves you will love me too." How wrong she was. Monica knew about the will. She had to know, and she knew that as long as Helen was alive and lucid, she couldn't sell the house or make drastic changes to the family assets. Her mother-in-law was an obstacle, a hindrance to her plans. Helen closed her eyes and let the tears flow. They weren't tears of self-pity, they were tears of understanding. She finally understood that she was fighting for her life, literally, and if she was going to fight, she was going to fight to the end. On the 11th day, she started exercising on the attic floor. Simple push-ups, stretches, movements to maintain circulation. If someone was going to try to starve and dehydrate her, she was going to resist as much as possible. She was going to get strong. She was going to survive. Luna seemed to understand. She started doing the same feline stretches, arching and exercising alongside Helen. "We're a team, aren't we, girl?" The cat meowed softly as if agreeing. On the 12th day, Monica came up again. This time she only brought water, not even mouldy bread. Helen realized the plan was accelerating. Her death was meant to look natural. An elderly woman who died of old age alone in her room. "Monica!" Helen managed to speak when her daughter-in-law was almost leaving. "Why?" The woman stopped at the door, still without looking back. For a moment Helen thought she wouldn't answer, but then she turned, lowered her mask and smiled. It was a cold, empty smile, like a shark's. "Because you're in my way." And she left. Helen stared at the closed door for a long time. She was no longer sad. She was no longer confused. She was angry. A cold, calculated anger that burned in her stomach like acid. Monica had made a mistake. She had confirmed that it was all premeditated. And somehow, some way, Helen was going to get that information to Richard. She was going to survive and tell him everything. She looked at Luna, who watched her with alert green eyes. "You know, girl, I think she forgot something important. I raised a son alone. I worked 2 jobs to pay for his education. I was widowed at 40 and never bowed my head to anyone. That young woman downstairs doesn't know who she's messing with." Luna meowed as if saying, That's right. And Helen smiled for the first time in 10 days. It was a small, weak smile, but real. She was going to fight, she was going to resist, and she was going to win. What she didn't know was that at that exact moment, Richard's flight was being cancelled due to weather issues, and that he was already buying a ticket for the first available plane the next day. Time was running out for Monica, but she didn't know it. Chapter 4. 15 days. Helen woke up knowing it was the 15th day. Not because she had slept well. Sleep came in fragments, interrupted by thirst and nightmares. But because her body had developed an internal survival clock, each cell counted the hours as if they were precious coins. Luna was too quiet, lying on her chest, breathing slowly. Helen felt panic. She couldn't lose her now. She couldn't be alone in these final moments. Luna, wake up. Wake up, girl. She stroked the cat until she opened her green eyes. You'll stay with me. Promise? You'll stay with me until the end. Downstairs she heard different activity. Quick footsteps, raised voices. Something was happening. Helen dragged herself to the window and tried to see something, but the angle didn't allow it. She pressed her ear to the door and managed to catch fragments of a phone. Conversation. It was Monica, and she sounded nervous. No, it can't be today. I need a few more days. Yes, I know we agreed, but no, she's still... Yes, she's very frail, but... Helen frowned. Monica was talking to someone about her condition, as if she were reporting to someone. Adult Protective Services will understand. An 87-year-old woman, alone, no close family. Of course it will look natural. Helen's stomach chilled. Adult Protective Services. What was this about? And what did Monica mean by look natural? The conversation continued, but now in a lower tone. Helen could only catch a few words. Document, signature, inheritance, mental institution. Mental institution. Helen recoiled from the door as if it were on fire. The plan was worse than she imagined. Monica didn't just want to starve her to death. She wanted to declare her mentally incompetent, commit her to an institution, and take over everything. That's why Adult Protective Services. That's why the staging of an abandoned, frail, elderly woman, unable to care for herself. That's why the 15 days of torture, so she would appear exactly as Monica wanted, weak, confused, out of touch with reality. Footsteps on the stairs returned. This time they were different, heavier, more than one person. Helen got up with difficulty and stood with her back against the wall. If it was going to be the end, she would face it standing. The door opened, and Monica entered, accompanied by two uniformed men. One held papers, the other a folding stretcher. Mrs. Helen. Monica's voice was sweet again, theatrical. Some gentlemen are here to take you to a place where you can be better cared for. Helen looked at the two men. They looked like people who had been doing this kind of work for a long time, collecting people who had nowhere else to go, people their families no longer wanted, people who were in the way. I'm not going anywhere. Mom, Helen, you're not well. Look at the state you're in. You need special care. Monica turned to the men. As you can see, she's very frail. She can't take care of herself. One of the men approached with the papers. Ma'am, you'll sign here, authorizing the transfer. I won't sign anything. Ma'am, it's for your own good. Your family is concerned? What family? Helen laughed, but it was a bitter laugh. Do you know what family left me locked in this room for 15 days, without water, without food? The men exchanged glances. Monica hastened to explain. She's confused. You know, age. Sometimes she gets a little... mixes things up. She's being very well cared for, but she insists on these fantasies. Fantasies? Helen turned to the men. You want to see fantasy? Look at this room. Smell this. Do you think someone who is being well cared for gets into this condition? The room really smelled bad. 15 days without a bath, without changing clothes, without cleaning. It was impossible not to. "Notice," one of the men hesitated. "Ma'am, the family said you chose to stay locked in your room, that you don't want to accept help." "Chose?" Helen laughed again. "Do you think I chose to be locked up? Go on, try to open this door from the inside. Go ahead." The men looked at the door. There was no doorknob on the inside, only a lock. Monica realized the situation was spiraling out of control. "Look, she's having a meltdown. Please, it's better if we take her now. She'll calm down at the hospital." But Helen saw a spark of doubt in the men's eyes. It was her chance, perhaps her only one. "Please." She approached them, holding Luna in her arms. "Please, just give me 5 minutes to explain what happened. 5 minutes." "No, she won't explain anything. She's delusional." Monica tried to intercept, but one of the men gestured for her to step back. "Let her speak. It's protocol to hear the person's side." And Helen told them everything. Quickly, stumbling over her words, afraid that at any moment Monica would invent an excuse to stop the conversation. She told them about the renovation that never existed, about the 15 days locked up, about the food and water that stopped coming, about Richard's will, about everything. When she finished, the silence in the room was deafening. One of the men turned to Monica. "Ma'am, can you show us where the renovations are being done? You can't believe her. Look at the state she's in. It's obvious she's confused." But the men were already going downstairs. Helen followed them, leaning on the wall, with Luna in her arms. Monica came behind, trying to explain, justify, lie. There was no renovation, no workers, no ongoing construction, no noise. The house was in perfect condition, clean, organized, normal. One of the men pulled out his phone and made a call. Helen couldn't hear the entire conversation, but she caught a few words. Suspicion, investigate, mistreatment. Monica realized everything had gone wrong. She tried one last card. "Look, maybe there was a misunderstanding. Maybe she locked herself in and—" But no one was listening anymore. The men put away their papers and prepared to leave. "Mrs. Helen, do you want to go to a shelter, or do you have somewhere you can stay for now?" Helen looked around the living room that had been her home for so many years. Now it looked like a stage set after the play ends, false, empty, lifeless. "I want to go anywhere, anywhere far from here." And it was at that moment that a car pulled up to the driveway. A door slammed, quick footsteps on the sidewalk. Richard had arrived. Chapter 5. The key turned in the front door lock, and Richard stormed in like a hurricane, throwing his suitcase to the floor and loosening his tie. He had come straight from the airport, exhausted from 2 connections and a turbulent flight, thinking only of taking a shower and sleeping for 12 straight hours. He stopped in the middle of the living room when he saw the scene. His mother, at least he thought it was his mother, skeletal, dirty, holding a cat in her arms, surrounded by 2 adult protective services agents. Monica stood beside them, pale as a ghost, stammering explanations that made no sense. "What is going on here?" The words shot from Richard's mouth like gunfire. Everyone turned to him, but he could only look at Helen, at what was left of her, her sunken eyes, her yellowish skin, her disheveled hair, clothes that looked like they hadn't been changed in days. "Mom." He approached slowly, as if she might break with any sudden movement. "Mom, what happened to you?" Helen looked at her son as if she were seeing a ghost. She blinked several times, trying to make sure she wasn't hallucinating. "Richard, is that really you?" Her voice came out as a whisper, hoarse from so much screaming in the early days of her captivity. Richard knelt in front of her, unconcerned with his expensive suit or the presence of strangers. "It's me, Mom. It's me. What did they do to you?" Helen extended her free hand and touched her son's face, still disbelieving. "You came back. You really came back." "Of course I came back. I always come back." He held her hand, cold and trembling. "Now tell me what happened. Why are you like this? Where are your clothes? Why do you look this way?" Monica tried to intervene. "Richard, darling, your mother is going through a difficult time. Her age, you know. I was trying to arrange special care for her when—" "Shut up!" The words came out so cold that even the APS agents flinched. Richard didn't even look at his wife. He was focused only on his mother. "Mom, tell me everything, from the beginning." And Helen told him everything. The renovation that never existed, the attic, the 15 days locked up, the hunger, the thirst, the plan to commit her. She spoke slowly, pausing to breathe, but omitting no detail. With each word, Richard's face grew tighter. When she finished, the silence in the room was absolute. Even Luna stopped meowing. Richard stood up slowly and turned to Monica. It was as if he were moving in slow motion. When they were face to face, he looked into her eyes for long seconds. 15 days? Monica opened her mouth, but no sound came out. 15 days locked in the attic, without water, without food? "Richard, I can explain." "Can you? Are you going to explain how my mother, who was healthy when I left, turned into this skeleton in 2 weeks? Are you going to explain why she smells like she hasn't bathed in days? Are you going to explain why there are adult protective services agents in my house?" Monica tried to approach, but he took a step back. "Don't touch me. Don't come near me." One of the APS agents cleared his throat. "Sir, we need to finalize our report. There are indications of mistreatment and—" "Indications?" Richard laughed, but there was no humor in the sound. "Look at my mother. Are these indications?" He turned to Monica again. "Do you know what you've done? Do you know the crime you've committed?" "It was a misunderstanding, Richard. She was confused, locking herself in her room. I tried to help." "Lies!" The voice came from Helen, firmer now. "She's lying, son. The door doesn't open from the inside. Never did. She locked me in there." Richard looked at the stairs. "I'm going to see this attic." "Richard, you don't need to. I'm going to see this attic now." He climbed the steps 2 at a time, followed by one of the APS agents. Monica stayed in the living room with Helen, not knowing what to do with her hands, avoiding any eye contact. When Richard returned 5 minutes later, he had an expression Helen had never seen before. It was more than anger. It was disgust, profound revulsion. "An old mattress in a stuffy cubicle." He spoke, looking at the floor. "No bathroom, no water, no doorknob on the door." He turned to the APS agents. "You will file the criminal charges. Today, now." "Sir, first we need to—" "No. First you will file the complaint. My mother will give her statement when she has recovered, and you will investigate everything. Every day she was locked up, every meal she didn't receive, every lie this woman told." Monica finally found her voice. "Richard, please, can we talk in private? Your marriage is at stake." "My marriage ended the moment you locked my mother in that attic." "But—" "It's over, Monica. You're leaving my house today. Now. You're taking your clothes and you're going. And if you try to come back, if you try to come near my mother again, if you try to touch anything that's mine, I swear I will make you regret you were ever born." Helen, who was watching everything as if it were a movie, felt something strange in her chest. It wasn't relief. It wasn't revenge. It was a deep sadness, because she knew that house would never be the same. That family was broken forever, and that somehow she was at the center of it all. "Richard," her voice came out softly. "Son." He turned to her, and all the anger on his face disappeared. "Yes, Mom?" "Take Luna to get some water. She's thirsty." And somehow, that simple request, to take care of the little cat, was what broke Richard. He knelt again in front of his mother and cried. He cried like he hadn't since childhood, like he hadn't since the day his father died. Helen placed her hand on his head and remained silent. She knew that words at that moment wouldn't help. Only time would begin to heal that wound. But at least now she was sure of one thing. She was no longer alone. Chapter 6. The house fell silent after Monica left. A heavy silence, laden with unsaid things and open wounds. Richard had insisted Helen go to the hospital, but she refused. She wanted to stay home. She wanted to sleep in her own bed. She wanted to start forgetting. But forgetting wasn't that simple. In the first few days, she couldn't stay alone in any room. When Richard left for work, she followed him to the door like Luna did with her. When he took more than 2 hours to return, she called the office to make sure everything was all right. At night, she woke up in a panic, sweating cold, thinking she was back in the attic. She went to the bedroom door to check if it opened from the inside. She checked 3, 4 times. Only then could she go back to sleep. Richard noticed and started leaving his own bedroom door open so she could hear him breathing during the night. It was a small comfort, but it worked. "Mum, do you want to talk to someone? A therapist, maybe?" Helen shook her head. "I just want you to stay close." He cancelled all business trips. He started working from home whenever possible. He hired a nurse to keep Helen company when he had to go out, but she only felt safe with Carla, the housekeeper who, they later discovered, had been threatened by Monica not to bring food up to the attic. "She said if I brought you anything, I'd be fired on the spot. And I needed the job, Mrs. Helen. I have 3 children to support." Carla cried as she explained. "I wanted to help, but I was afraid." Helen consoled her. She understood the fear. She understood the need to protect oneself first. She held no grudge. The criminal case against Monica progressed slowly. Expensive attorneys, appeals, legal maneuvers. She claimed Helen had mental problems, that she locked herself in her room, that it was all just a misunderstanding, but the medical reports were clear. Signs of severe malnutrition, dehydration, psychological trauma, consistent with confinement. "This will take years, Mom, but we'll see it through." Helen nodded, but deep down she didn't care much for formal justice. The justice that mattered had already been served. Monica was out of the house, out of their lives, and Helen was alive. 3 months after the rescue, Helen began leaving the house again. First, just to the garden, then to the corner, finally to the grocery store with Richard. It was on one of these outings that she saw Monica. They were in the grocery store line when Helen felt that familiar shiver on the back of her neck. She turned around, and there she was, 3 aisles ahead, buying just a few basic items. She had lost weight, had deep, dark circles under her eyes, and wore simple clothes, very different from the designer. Dresses she wore when she was Richard's wife. Their eyes met for a second. Monica paled even more and immediately looked away. She grabbed her groceries and almost ran out of the store. "Mom, are you okay?" Richard had noticed the change in her expression. She was there. She was there. He looked around, but Monica had already vanished. "Do you want to leave?" "No." Helen took a deep breath. "I'm not running anymore. Not anymore." That night, she dreamed of Monica for the first time since the rescue, but it wasn't a nightmare. In the dream, she was making breakfast when Monica entered the kitchen. Not the haughty, cruel Monica from before, but a broken, ashamed woman. "I could have been different," Monica said in the dream. "I could have loved you like a mother." Helen woke up with a strange feeling in her chest. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but perhaps it was the beginning of something akin to understanding. In the following months, life slowly returned to normal. Helen resumed her small rituals, watering the plants in the morning, watching her favorite evening show, knitting on the living room sofa. Richard resumed traveling, but always for short periods, and always calling twice a day. It was during one of these trips that the incident occurred. Helen was alone at home. She had given Carla the day off and assured Richard she would be fine, when she heard a strange noise in the garden. It was early morning. She'd gone downstairs to get water when she noticed a shadow moving near the old oak tree. Her first instinct was to run to her room and lock herself in, but something made her stop. She grabbed a flashlight and went out the kitchen door. It was Monica. She was on the stone bench where Helen used to sunbathe, crying softly. She had lost even more weight and looked frail, broken. "What are you doing here?" Monica startled and tried to stand up, but she was so weak she almost fell. I just wanted to apologize." Helen stood a few feet away, holding the flashlight. "You can't be here. There's a restraining order." "I know. I couldn't sleep. I haven't been able to sleep for months. I keep thinking about what I did, about the attic, about you locked in there." Monica sobbed. "I turned into a monster. I don't know how, I don't know when, but I did." Helen looked at the woman who had once tried to starve and dehydrate her. Now she saw only a lost person, destroyed by her own poison. "Why did you do that to me?" "Because I was afraid." "Afraid of what?" "That you would be more important to him than me. That he loved you more than he loved me. That I would never be good enough." Monica wiped her nose with her sleeve. "And also for the inheritance. I wanted everything. I wanted to own everything, the sheer honesty of the confession caught Helen off guard. "And now, did you get what you wanted?" Monica laughed, but it was a bitter laugh. "Now I've lost everything. I lost him, I lost the house, I lost the respect of everyone I know, and worse, I lost respect for myself." They stood in silence for a few minutes. Luna appeared out of nowhere and rubbed against Helen's legs, purring softly. "Are you going to call the police?" Monica asked. Helen thought for a moment. She could call. She should call. It's what any normal person would do. "Leave," she said, finally. "Leave and don't come back, and try to find a way to live with what you've done." Monica slowly stood up and began to walk towards the gate. She stopped halfway. "Helen, what is it?" "I hope you can forgive me one day. Not for me to feel better, but for you to be able to live in peace." And she left through the same gap in the fence she had entered through. Helen stood in the garden for a few more minutes, petting Luna. When she returned home, she slept better than she had in months. It wasn't forgiveness yet, but it was the end of the anger. And that was a start. Chapter 7. A year later. Helen woke up without the tightness in her chest that had accompanied her every morning since the rescue. She was surprised by the feeling, or rather the lack of it. She got up slowly, as she always did, but for the first time in months, she didn't rush to the door to check if it opened from the inside. Luna was sprawled on the windowsill, enjoying the morning sun. She had gained weight, and her fur was shiny again. It was funny how animals recovered faster than humans, or perhaps it was because they didn't dwell on the past. Richard was in the kitchen, making coffee. It was a routine he had adopted since Monica left, waking up before his mother, making breakfast, and staying with her until at least 10 in the morning before leaving for work. "Good morning, Mom. Sleep well?" "I did." She sat at the table, noticing he had made pancakes, her favorites. "And you? Don't you have an early meeting today?" "Cancelled it. I thought we could do something together. It's been a while since we've gone out." Helen smiled. She knew he was lying. She had seen his schedule on the table, full of appointments, but she appreciated the thoughtfulness. "Son, you don't have to take care of me as if I'm going to break at any moment anymore." Richard stopped flipping the pancakes. "I know, but I like it. I like being here with you." "And I like it too, but you have your life, your business, your, I don't know, girlfriends?" He laughed. "Girlfriends? Mum, I got divorced a year ago. I'm still a little traumatized by relationships. You can't let one bad experience ruin all possibilities. Not all women are like her. Richard served the pancakes and sat at the table. You can talk about her now without getting nervous. I can. Helen took a bite. You know, I've been thinking a lot about what happened, and I think I've understood some things. Like what? Like how I let that happen. Mom, you didn't let anything happen. You were a victim. I was, but I was also a little complicit. Richard frowned. What do you mean? I never confronted her, never said no. I always accepted everything she decided about the house, about the routine, about my life. I slowly diminished myself until I became invisible. You were trying to keep the peace. I was trying not to bother. There's a difference. Helen took a sip of coffee. I was afraid you'd have to choose between us, and I was sure you'd choose her. Never. I didn't know that, and she didn't either. That's why she saw me as a threat. Helen looked out the window. It's no excuse for what she did, but perhaps it helps to understand. They ate in silence for a few minutes. It was a comfortable silence, different from those first months of nervousness and fear. Mum, can I ask you something? Of course. Do you still have nightmares? Occasionally, but now they're different. Different how? Helen thought about the best way to explain. Before, I dreamed I was locked up again, that you didn't come back, that no one found me. Now, when I dream about those days, I see myself stronger, resisting, fighting. You were very strong. I didn't feel strong at the time. I felt abandoned, betrayed, useless. Only afterward could I see the strength I had. The phone rang. It was the attorney, with news. About the case. Monica had accepted a settlement, restitution, community service, and mandatory psychological counseling. She wouldn't go to jail, but she'd have a criminal record for the rest of her life. Do you want to accept the settlement? Richard asked after hanging up. Helen thought for a moment. I do. I don't want to see her in court anymore. I don't want to relive all of this. Are you sure? I am. The justice that mattered has already been served. She lost everything she wanted, and I got back what I thought I had lost. What had you lost? The certainty that you love me. Richard held his mother's hand. I always loved you, always, even when I was distracted, even when I traveled too much, even when I didn't realize what was happening. I know, but for a while, I forgot. That afternoon, Helen decided to do something she hadn't done in over a year. Go out alone, not far, just to the neighborhood park where there was a craft fair. Richard was nervous. Do you want me to go with you? No, I need to do this alone. She walked slowly through the streets she had known for decades. She greeted neighbors, stopped to admire a blooming garden, bought an ice cream at a parlor she used to frequent with her grandson. At the fair, she found a stall that sold plants. The vendor was a woman roughly her age, friendly and chatty. Looking for anything specific? A new plant, to start fresh. The vendor showed several options, explaining the care for each one. Helen chose a small white rose bush, still without flowers, but full of buds ready to bloom. This one's resilient, the vendor said. It can handle sun, it can handle rain, it can even handle a little neglect. And when it blooms, it's a spectacle. Perfect, then. On the way back, Helen passed in front of the building where Monica now lived, a small apartment in a modest neighborhood. She wasn't spying. It was just the shortest way. But when she looked up, she saw Monica in the window. Their eyes met again. This time, neither looked away. They remained like that for a few seconds. Two women who had deeply hurt each other and were now trying to find a way to move forward. Monica waved, a small, hesitant wave laden with shame and regret. Helen hesitated for a moment, then she waved back. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but perhaps it was the recognition that both were imperfect human beings trying to find a way to live with their choices. When she arrived home, she planted the rosebush in the garden, in the same spot where she used to sit with Luna to sunbathe. Richard found her there, getting her hands dirty with soil, a smile on her face. "How was your outing?" "Good. Liberating." She wiped her hands on her gardening clothes. "I think I'm ready to live again, for real this time." "You never stopped living." "I did, for a while, but now I'm back." That night, Helen slept with her bedroom door open, not out of fear, but because she liked to hear the sounds of the house. The living room clock chiming the hours, Luna purring on the sofa, Richard stirring in the next room. Sounds of home, sounds of family, sounds of life that continues despite everything. And for the first time in a long time, she slept without dreaming of attics or locked doors. She dreamed of white roses blooming in the garden. Chapter 8. 2 years later. The rosebush had grown and taken over an entire corner of the garden. Helen was pruning the dry branches when she saw a car pull up in front of the house. She recognized the person who got out. It was Carla, the former housekeeper. But she looked different. More confident, well-dressed. "Mrs. Helen, how are you?" Helen stood up, wiping the dirt from her hands. "Carla, what a nice surprise. Come in, come in." They sat on the porch, with Luna happily rubbing against Carla's feet. The young woman had brought a cornbread. She remembered it was Helen's favorite. "How are the boys?" "Growing fast. The oldest got into engineering school. The middle one wants to be a veterinarian. And the youngest is still deciding between being an astronaut or a soccer player." Helen laughed. "And you? How's life?" "Better. Much better." Carla hesitated a little. "Actually, I came here to tell you some news, and to thank you." "Thank me for what?" "The reference you gave me. I got a job at a big company, in the cleaning department. But that's not all. They paid for a technical course for me. Now I'm a supervisor." Helen smiled. After the whole case came to light, several people had sought Carla out, offering work. The story of how she was threatened by Monica, but tried to help Helen within her possibilities, had touched many people. "And you know the best part? I'll be able to send the boys to a private school. I never thought that would be possible." "You deserve it, dear. You've worked hard your whole life." Carla was quiet for a moment. "Mrs. Helen, can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Did you manage to forgive?" The question caught Helen by surprise, even though it was something she had reflected on a lot in recent months. "It's complicated, Carla. Forgiveness isn't a switch you just flip. It's a process. But do you still feel anger?" "Sometimes, when I remember some things. But it's not an anger that consumes me. It's more of a sadness for what could have been different." Carla nodded. "I keep thinking, what if I had been braver? What if I had risked my job to help you? You did what you could within your circumstances. You had 3 children to support, I understand. But I regret it. Regret is only worth something if we learn from it. And you learned. Now you're helping other people in your position, aren't you?" It was true. Carla had become a kind of mentor for other domestic workers, advising them on labor rights and how to report mistreatment. After Carla left, Helen pondered their conversation. It was interesting how the people around her seemed to need her approval to move forward, as if she were a kind of moral compass to gauge whether they had acted right or wrong. Richard arrived in the late afternoon, as he always did on Fridays. He had adopted the habit of working half days on Fridays so he could spend more time with her. "How was your day?" Carla visited. "She's doing well, the kids are growing up." "That's good. And how are you?" Helen looked at her son. In the last 2 years, he had changed a lot. He was more present, more attentive, less anxious about business. Sometimes she wondered if this change was just guilt over what happened, or if it was truly a natural evolution. I'm fine. In fact, I'm thinking about something. What kind of thing? I want to do volunteer work. Richard seemed surprised. What kind of volunteer work? Visiting seniors in nursing homes, talking to them. Many must be alone, abandoned by their families. Are you sure? Won't it be too difficult? Helen understood his concern. Visiting people in situations of abandonment could stir up bad memories. It might be, but it could also be a way to transform what I went through into something useful, to give meaning to it all. They talked about the idea during dinner. Richard was cautious, but didn't want to discourage her. They agreed she would start slowly, once a week, accompanied by someone from the institution. On Saturday morning, Helen woke up with a strange feeling. She had dreamed of Monica again, but this time the dream was different. They were sitting in the garden, having coffee, talking normally, as if nothing had happened, as if they were truly mother-in-law and daughter-in-law. When she woke up, she felt no anger or sadness. She felt a strange peace. She decided to go for a walk in the morning, something she had resumed doing regularly. The neighborhood was slowly waking up, people going out to buy bread, children playing on the sidewalk. That's when she saw the scene. On the corner, a woman in her 70s had fallen on the sidewalk. A younger woman, probably Monica's age, was beside her, yelling into her phone. "Please, come quick. My mother-in-law fell and can't get up." Helen approached. "Can I help with anything?" The younger woman looked at her with despair in her eyes. She tripped on the sidewalk. I think she hurt her leg. The ambulance is on its way, but... Helen knelt beside the fallen woman. "It's okay, dear. You're fine. Just try not to move too much." The elderly woman was scared and confused. Helen held her hand and talked to her, calming her down until the paramedics arrived. When the paramedics took the woman away, the daughter-in-law turned to Helen. "Thank you so much. You were an angel." "It was nothing. I hope she'll be all right." I was so nervous. I have a difficult relationship with her, and when this happened I was afraid that..." The woman stopped, as if she had said too much. "Afraid of what?" "That they would think it was my fault, that I don't take good care of her. You know how people judge when there are problems between a daughter-in-law and mother-in-law." Helen looked at that woman, young, scared, trying to do the right thing even with all the difficulties of the relationship. It was like seeing a different version of her own story. "You called the ambulance. You stayed with her. You didn't leave her alone. That's what matters." The woman started to cry. "Sometimes I get so angry at her. She criticizes everything I do, interferes with my children's upbringing, is never satisfied, and then I feel guilty for feeling angry." It's normal to feel angry. What's not normal is using that anger to hurt. They talked for a few more minutes. Helen gave the young woman her phone number, telling her that if she needed anything or just someone to talk to call. When she arrived home, Richard was concerned. "You took longer than usual." Helen told him what happened. He was proud of how she had helped. "You know, Mom, I think you're right about the volunteer work. You have so much to offer." That night, Helen looked at her reflection in the mirror before bed. She was different from the woman who had been kicked out of her home 2 years ago. Still thinner, more marked by age, but there was something new in her eyes, a kind of serene wisdom. She had survived the worst someone could do to a person, and not only had she survived, she had transformed. The suffering, instead of embittering her, had made her a more compassionate person. Perhaps that was the true justice, not the one that happened in courts, but the one that happened within people. The ability to transform pain into wisdom, trauma into strength, abandonment into compassion. And perhaps, just perhaps, that was true forgiveness. Not forgetting what happened, but using that experience to prevent it from happening to others. Before going to sleep, she looked out the window towards the rose bush. Even in the dark, she could see the silhouette of the branches full of flowers, resilient, as the vendor had said, capable of blooming even after the most severe pruning. It was a good metaphor for life. Chapter 9. 3 years later. Helen was in the nursing home garden talking with Mr. Vincent, a 92-year-old gentleman who hadn't received visitors in over 5 years. It was her favorite Friday activity, spending the afternoon there, listening to stories, sharing memories. "Mrs. Helen, you are a gift from God in my life," Mr. Vincent said, holding her hand with his trembling hands. "You are a gift in mine, Mr. Vincent." It was true. In the last 2 years, since she started volunteering, Helen had discovered a new version of herself. A version that found purpose in caring for others, that transformed her own experience of abandonment into a tool of solace. Her cell phone vibrated. It was a message from Richard. "Mom, you need to come home early today. I have a surprise." Helen said goodbye to Mr. Vincent and the other residents, promising to return the following week. On her way home, she stopped by the flower shop and bought some flowers for the rose bush, now a large, lush shrub that dominated half the garden. When she arrived, she found Richard in the living room with a strange expression on his face. He didn't seem happy or sad, just different. "Son, what's with that look? What happened?" "Sit here, Mom. I need to tell you something." Helen felt a chill in her stomach. "It's not an illness, is it?" No. It's about Monica." The name still caused a small jolt, even after so much time. "What about her?" "She passed away, Mom. Heart attack, the day before yesterday." Helen was silent for long seconds, processing the information. She felt a confused mix of emotions. Relief, sadness, a strange sense of emptiness. "How did you find out?" "Her attorney called me. I was the only reference she had. Apparently she had no one left. And the funeral, it was yesterday. Just the attorney, the minister, and a few cemetery staff." Helen imagined the scene. The woman who once wanted to control everything, buried alone, without flowers, without tears, without a single person who truly loved her. "How are you feeling?" she asked. "Richard." "Confused. I don't feel sadness, but I don't feel relief either. It's like a part of my life has closed, you know." Helen understood. She herself felt something similar. "Can I ask you something, Mom? Do you feel anything?" Helen thought carefully before answering. "Sadness. But it's not sadness because she died. It's sadness for the life she chose to live." They were silent for a while. Luna appeared and climbed onto Helen's lap, as she always did when she sensed that something heavy was in the air. "Son, do you want to go to the cemetery?" Richard seemed surprised. "Me? For what?" "To say goodbye, to close that chapter with dignity." "And you? Do you want to go too?" Helen hesitated. The idea of seeing Monica's grave stirred contradictory feelings, but there was something inside her that knew she needed to do it. "I do. I think I need to." The next day they went to the cemetery. It was a simple, well-maintained place with old trees that offered generous shade. Monica's grave was as simple as could be, just a small tombstone with her name and dates. There were no flowers. Helen approached slowly, holding the white roses she had brought from her garden. Richard stayed a little behind, respecting the moment. "Hi, Monica." She spoke softly, feeling a little silly talking to a tombstone. "I came to say goodbye, and to bring some flowers. Everyone deserves flowers." She placed the bouquet on the grave and stood there, looking at the name carved in the stone. "You know, I spent a lot of time angry at you. A lot. And then I spent some time trying to understand you. Now I just feel pity. Pity for the woman you could have been and weren't." The wind rustled the leaves of the trees, creating a soft sound that seemed like a response. I hope that wherever you are now, you've found peace. The peace you couldn't find here. Helen stood for a few more minutes in silence, then turned to Richard. We can go. On the way home, they stopped at a coffee shop they used to frequent when Richard was a child. They ordered chocolate cake and lattes, as they used to. Mom, can I ask an indiscreet question? You can. Did you really forgive her? Helen stirred the sugar in her coffee, thinking about the right answer. I don't know if forgiveness is the right word, but I stopped carrying the anger. I understood that she was a sick person, full of fears and insecurities that led her to do terrible things. That's forgiveness, isn't it? Maybe, or maybe it's just understanding. Sometimes I think the two things blend together. And me, did you forgive me for letting that happen? The question caught Helen by surprise. Son, you couldn't have known. But I should have noticed. I should have paid more attention. Helen reached across the table and took Richard's hand. You were a busy man trusting the woman you loved. That's not a crime. And when you found out, you did everything right. But if I had arrived a day later... But you didn't arrive a day later. You arrived at the right time, and you know why? Because you're my son, and a son always knows when his mother needs him, even if unconsciously. Richard smiled for the first time that day. When they arrived home, Helen went straight to the garden. The rosebush was full of new buds, preparing for another bloom. She watered the plants, arranged some branches, cleaned the dry leaves. It was her ritual of peace, the way she had found to connect with the life that continued, always, despite everything. Luna appeared and rubbed against her legs, purring loudly. You know, Luna, I think today I finally closed that chapter of our lives. Not that we'll forget, some things you don't forget, but now we can remember without it hurting. The cat meowed, as if agreeing. That night, Helen slept deeply and without dreams. When she woke up the next morning, she felt different, lighter, as if she had left heavy baggage somewhere and could now walk more freely. Richard was in the kitchen making coffee, as he always did on Saturdays. But there was something different about his demeanor, too. A new tranquility. Good morning, Mom. Good morning, son. How are you? At peace. He stopped stirring the coffee and looked at her. For the first time in 3 years, I'm truly at peace. Helen smiled. That's what she wanted to hear. They had breakfast on the porch, watching the garden awaken with the morning sun. The roses were beginning to open, promising another day of simple, true beauty. And Helen understood that this was the real victory. Not the justice of the courts, not the punishment of those who hurt her, but the ability to smile again, to trust again, to love again. It had taken 3 years, but she had finally arrived where she needed to be. Back to life, back to love, back to herself. If this story touched your heart, like, comment, and subscribe. Stories like this deserve to be remembered.